Welcome to podcast number 44 for Thanks for Your Service. Our focus is on historical topics relating to the Australian military, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Thanks for Your Service. Our website is www.thanksforyourservice.net, and you can email us at info@thanksforyourservice.net. In many towns, in many parks across Australia, you'll almost certainly find a war memorial in dedication to those who served and died in wars from the Boer War through to Afghanistan. I live in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and one particular memorial that I visited recently has a unique design. The shrine at Surrey Gardens in Surrey Hills features a carved timber honour roll, and the shrine was dedicated before the armistice. Sandra Dexter, with a background in journalism and editing, joins us to talk about the history of the shrine and her recent involvement to identify servicemen and women from Surrey Hills and Mont. Joining us on the line from Bendigo in Victoria is Sandra Dexter. Sandra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Can we start off with letting people know the location of Surrey Gardens?
Okay, Surrey Gardens is situated in Surrey Hills. That's Surrey Hills, Melbourne. And the shrine that is in Surrey Gardens actually backs onto Union Road, and it's built on the highest point in the gardens, and looks west down towards, there's a memorial cross there, and then it looks, I think you can actually see views of the city from there as well. So it's a small garden, but it's very beautiful, got lots of mature trees. And recently I think a rotunda was rebuilt there that was there originally in the centre of the gardens.
Can you describe the shrine to us, a little bit about the architecture of it as well?
Okay, it's, I guess I kind of see it as kind of like a little bungalow there. Just nestled at the top. It's white. It has a pitch roof on it. It's made of stone, concrete, and wood. And you go inside, and there the honour boards there, which are copper plaques, and it's behind glass, and there's a lot of wood carving throughout the honour board as well.
What about the history of the shrine? Can you give us some background to it?
Yes, originally the idea for having the shrine and the honour board came from a lady called Sarah Steele. She was the president of the local ladies' patriotic league, if you like, and she wanted a memorial for the soldiers from Surrey Hills and Mont. And we think the idea was being thought of in around 1916, 1970, so during the war. She approached a local man called John Kendrick Blogg to design and create the honour board. And it was reported at the time that he needed a fair bit of persuasion to do this, because I can imagine it must have seemed a daunting thing to come up with a design and do it and do justice to all the young men who had gone overseas. But she did persuade him, and he was in fact a very extraordinary wood sculptor who over the course of years had made many honour rolls. He did things like carvings in churches and things, but certainly many honour rolls. And he also carved a wreath for the tomb of the unknown soldier that was at Westminster Abbey. He made gifts for people like the Prince of Wales when he visited Australia, and something for the King of Belgium, I think, too, at one stage. So he was a very talented wood sculptor, and he was a local resident, and he was also a poet. So as well as doing the wood carving for the shrine, he also came up with a poem to put on it as well. So that The carvings he did on the honour board were actually there's a large boomerang at the top, which signifies return, and over there's the rising sun badge is underneath that, and there's also panels with wattle and gum leaves. It's actually quite exquisite, the detail, and it's a three-dimensional work, so it's really very beautiful. And it's probably one of the things, it's the thing that drew me first to the shrine. So all his work was a gift to the local community. He did it all for free. The building design was donated by some architects called Gawler and Drummond, and John Gawler is actually someone who's on the honour roll. And so the funds were to come up to pay for the building were raised locally by the Surrey Hills Progress Association, and they also went door to door, gathering the names that were to appear on the original 8 plaques that are in the centre of the honour board. And all the work was actually done, and the opening happened on the Sunday, the 7th of April in 1918. So the war was still going on. Mm. And there were said to be about 1,000 people there at the opening, and a military band played, and there were lots of speeches. And at the end of the ceremony, people were asked to contact the Progress Association if they had any other names that needed to be added. And of course, men and women were still signing up, training and embarking for duty overseas at that point. So it was, at that point, yes, very much a work in progress. And then in the following years, probably in the up to the early 20s, another 4 plaques were added, with about another 130 names. So there's about 500 names on there.
And the names on the honour roll, were these men who died during the war or who had served from the district?
Yeah, that was actually one of my first curious points when I first saw it, was, did all these men die? And no, it served, men who served, and there are ones who died on there as well, but it served. And in fact, when I did the research, some of them didn't even embark for overseas, so it was home service that they were probably remembered for. So
in 2018, we saw the 100th anniversary of the shrine, and this now leads into your involvement. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, I suppose my involvement actually began probably 3 or 4 years before the 100th anniversary, because I had started researching the people on the honour roll, because I was curious to find out who they were and just find out more about them. And in fact, there were names on the board that were just surnames. They didn't even have a first initial, and I thought, surely we know what their first names are now. Or we've got so many resources that we can call on now with the Australian War Memorial, the National Archives, Ancestry, electoral rolls. I just wanted to find out who they all were. And I began with, I actually began because I was researching John Blogg's wood carvings, and there was a book on him in the Nuttawading Library. And I went there, and there was a seminar on researching World War I, and that pointed me to a bigger database by Bill Pritchard. And on this, he had already he identified quite a lot of the names, given them full names and given them the service numbers. So this was a fantastic start for me. But there were also a lot of errors and omissions on the honour board, and there were, in fact, at that point, there was empty spaces on the honour board for 4 more plaques. So there was room to fix the corrections and make the additions. So when the 100th anniversary came around, there was an opportunity, because there was lots of government grants around to do upgrading on memorials, World War I memorials. So just prior to that. So I got together with together with the Historical Society in Surrey Hills, the Progress Association, and the Burundara Council, we worked to have 4 new plaques installed in the same style as the original ones, and put up those corrections and the additional names, and they were happily in place just in time for the 100th anniversary. Basically, my involvement was about presenting this research at a display that we had set up in. There was a building in Surrey Gardens that used to be like a maternity child centre, but it hadn't been used for many years. But it had been recently refurbished, and it was the perfect location to put the display in because it was in the gardens and it actually overlooked the shrine. So I started from my research, I put together some display books, and the theme of the display was in their own words. I wanted to not just say in my words, I wanted it to be their words. So, and I knew that there was a lot of information, it was written down in many places, like there was a recording, an interview that was done with one of the soldiers called Rolly Mills at the Australian War Memorial. So there was recordings of that. So there was his words. There were diaries by Fred Mawson and Alice Pooley that were in the State Library. Actually, no, Alice Pooley's was in the State Library. Fred Mawson's came from a local man, his nephew. But there was letters and articles that were in the newspapers, so letters that the soldiers had written from the front of their experience that went into the newspapers. There were articles written about people when they came back saying what they'd done. So I went hunting for all their words, put them in display books, so like an A3 display book for different sections. So I had one on Gallipoli, one on the Western Front, one on the Australian Flying Corps, because that was in its early days and there was some remarkable material about that. And a local man, James Brake, had taken a lot of photographs of his time training at Laverton in these amazing aeroplanes. So I put their words together with photos, mainly that I'd got from the Australian War Memorial and also from the Historical Society, the local Historical Society. Yeah, so that was pretty much my role, was putting together that material for the display.
And the shrine was inaugurated before the end of World War I, just before the end, before the armistice. But was that unusual at the time? I recall reading that there was some sort of policy that may have prevented it. Do you know any background about that?
Yeah, there was a policy that wasn't that. Yes, you weren't supposed to be doing anything before the end of the war. But I think that there was, in fact, a couple that went up in Queensland, so the Surrey Hills one is usually when you see something written about it, says it's thought to be the first memorial in Victoria, because they did, yes, jump the gun, and they probably shouldn't have, but it was a very very patriotic area. They were very big on empire, and so there would have been a big push behind it, I think, locally.
There are also some canons that form part of the design of Surrey Gardens that predate World War I. Do you know anything about those?
I don't know a lot, and I don't know that there's a lot out there about it, because I did go hunting when I saw that was going to be one of your questions. I knew that they were called Brooks Babies. I don't think that's on the plaque that's actually on the canons. And it was a man called Arthur Brooks, whose kind of nickname was Arthur Empire Brooks. And he was the one who suggested buying the canons, I think, with the local, on a local association, but in the Progress Association, because they actually were at the Canterbury Sports Grounds, so not far away, and they must have been, I don't know, for some reason, getting rid of them. And the canons actually date back to 1843, but his idea was to have them as a a way to commemorate Australian service in the Boer War. And they were actually moved to Surrey Gardens, and they sit each side of the shrine. And there were quite a few, in my research I did find there were quite a few brothers or relations of the soldiers on the shrine who did fight in the Boer War.
And for people who are in Melbourne, it's certainly well worth a visit, because it is a unique part of Australian history, and certainly the wood carvings is something that I haven't seen in a lot of different war memorials around the country as well.
Yeah, it's small, but it's beautiful, and it's got a real charm about it, and yeah, it's quite a special thing, I think.
Sandra, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
In 1919, the two canons that flank the shrine were relocated from the Canterbury Sports Ground and are known as the Brooks Babies. The origins of the guns may well be the subject of a future podcast. We also now have a YouTube channel. Just search for Thanks for Your Service, and you can find links to the YouTube channel on our website and Facebook page. And there's vision of the shrine on our YouTube channel. That's the podcast for today. We're keen to hear your feedback. Leave a comment on our Facebook page, and if you're listening to us via iTunes or other podcast apps, please leave a review. Your reviews help others find our podcast. You can help support this podcast via Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. The links are on our website and Facebook page, and your support helps us with the production of this podcast. Thanks for listening.